everyone. I'm Miss Mary Jane Torreda, your moderator for today's virtual panel discussion. Today, we're diving into the critical topic of ethics in language education research. We'll explore key concepts, challenges, and best practices to guide us in conducting a responsible and ethical research together with our dear panelists. Let's welcome Ms. Althea Silvestre, Mr. Adrian Tejano, and Mr. Ranier Ygot. I'll start this discussion with the definition and importance of ethics. Allow me to answer this question, which is why ethics is important in language education research and how it protects participants' rights and well-being. You know what? Ethics plays a vital role in language education research as it ensures that investigations are conducted in a responsible, respectful, and transparent manner, protecting the rights and well-being of participants while advancing knowledge in the field. As we all know, ethics is about the principles or values that guide a person's behavior and decisions while interacting with others that help safeguard participants' personal information, maintaining confidentiality, and promoting unbiased information. Ethics also help researchers decide with honesty and accountability. So now, let's proceed to moral principles and values. This time, Mr. Ygot will be the one to answer and explain how do moral principles like respect, beneficence, and justice guide ethical decision-making in ALT research.
Thank you, Ms. Torreda. Moral principles like respect, beneficence, and justice are fundamental to ethical decision-making in English language teaching research. Respect for persons ensures that researchers treat participants with dignity and autonomy, allowing them to make informed decisions about their involvement in the study. Beneficence guides researchers to maximize potential benefits for participants and society while minimizing harm. This involves considering the potential risks and benefits of the study and taking steps to mitigate any risks. Justice ensures that participants are selected fairly and that the benefits and burdens of research are distributed equitably, avoiding bias and discrimination. By upholding these principles, researchers can ensure that their work is conducted ethically and responsibly.
Wow! Thank you, Mr. Ygot, for that meaningful answer. Here's the last question for you. The last question is about ethical dilemmas. Can you share and explain to us what are some common ethical dilemmas in ELT research and how can researchers balance rigorous data collection with participant privacy?
Thank you again, Ms. Torreda. A common ethical dilemma in English language teaching research is balancing rigorous data collection with participant privacy. Researchers need detailed and accurate data to ensure valid findings, but this can sometimes lead to the collection of sensitive information that might make participants uncomfortable. To address this, researchers should prioritize informed consent, ensuring participants fully understand the study and any potential risks. Anonymizing data, limiting data collection, and being mindful of the sensitivity of the information are also essential steps in ensuring ethical research practices and protecting participant privacy.
Now, let's have Mr. Tejano to answer our next two questions. The first question, Mr. Tejano, is about the approach to ethical decision-making, compare and contrast the utilitarian and deontological approaches to ethical decision-making. Which approach do you think is more effective in ELT research and why?
Thank you, Ms. Torreda, for raising that excellent point. The utilitarian approach is results-based. This is a selection of action that will lead to the greatest good for the majority of people despite the cost to be paid. The deontological approach involves the strict compliance with moral standards irrespective of the outcome. For ALT research, the deontological approach is preferable since it stresses on the rights, dignity, and protection of the participants. These are the important considerations for teaching and learning.
That's a great answer, Mr. Tejano. Now, for our last question for you, it's about AI in ELT research. So, how can AI tools like ChatGPT assist in ELT research and what ethical issues might arise from their use?
I appreciate your insightful question, Ms. Torreda. It assists with creating research topics, writing paper sections, designing instruments like surveys and interview guides, and proofreading manuscripts. It is also useful for data analysis by identifying trends. Use of AI in research should be transparent, revealing how and to what extent it has contributed to the development of content. It should also be closely scrutinized so it does not introduce bias from the training data, which could lead to an unfair interpretation of the data. Meanwhile, participants' privacy should be protected by properly anonymizing sensitive information and ensuring that any AI-generated output.
Thank you, Mr. Adrian, for your wonderful answer. So now, for the last two questions, let's have Miss Althea to provide us her insight. The first question for you to answer, Ms. Althea, is about cultural sensitivity in research. So how can researchers ensure cultural sensitivity and fairness when conducting studies in multilingual and multicultural contexts?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Reda. That's actually a good question. So, for researchers to ensure cultural sensitivity and fairness when conducting studies in multilingual and multicultural contexts, they must be aware of cultural differences for them to adopt their methods to respect participants' values and traditions. They should also engage or collaborate with the members of the target community to ensure cultural appropriateness. And lastly, they should be mindful and or use appropriate language, like they should avoid using jargons or language that is disrespectful or unfamiliar to the participants to avoid any conflict and of course to ensure cultural sensitivity. That's the goal.
Thank you, Ms. Althea. That's a brilliant answer. Now, for our last question to be answered again by you, it's about ethical reporting and dissemination. Can you explain to us why is it important to report research findings honestly and transparently? And how can researchers avoid misrepresentation or bias?
Definitely, Mr. Reda. It's my pleasure to answer that meaningful question. So, it is important to report research findings honestly and transparently because being transparent builds trust and avoid misinterpretation or bias. And that is also to show respect to the participants since that's their experiences and data. They should be presented accurately and not manipulated. And for researchers to avoid misinterpretation or bias, they should disclose and or discuss clearly the methods they are using throughout the process. Transparency and honesty, that's the key.
Wow, thank you again, Ms. Althea, for your incredible and wonderful answer. That concludes our virtual panel discussion today. Thank you to our esteemed panelists for sharing their insightful perspectives. We hope this discussion has been informative and stimulating. We encourage you to continue the conversation online using the hashtag discuss not to impress but to express. Thank you again for joining us.